Welcome to CMO Confidential, the podcast that takes you inside the drama, decisions, and choices that go with being the head of marketing. Hosted by five-time CMO Mike Linton.
Welcome, marketers, advertisers, and those who love them, the Chief Marketing Officer Confidential. CMO Confidential is a program that goes inside the drama, the decisions and the politics that go with being the head of marketing at any company is in what is one of the most scrutinized jobs in the executive suite. I'm Mike Linton, the former Chief Marketing Officer of Best Buy, eBay, Farmers Insurance, and Ancestry.com, here today with my guest, David Kenny. Today's topic, an experienced CEO talks about marketing, measurement, and the future. David started his career at Bain and went on to be the CEO of Digitas, the weather company, and now Nielsen. He's also served on probably too many boards to count. Full disclosure, I worked with David's agency during my time at Best Buy and found him to be strategic, client-focused, and hilarious. So I hope he lets the hilarious part out today. He's seen the industry from every angle, which gives him a unique, in my mind, 360-degree view of marketing and CMOs, and it's great to have him on the show. Welcome, David.
Glad to be here, Mike. I hope you didn't overpromise for me.
Oh, I'm certain I did not. So first question, David, you've been in this top seat for years. Tell us what you see now from a business perspective. What are the biggest issues on the horizon?
Listen, I think CEOs, those who are going to succeed, are spending a lot of time on their talent. Do you have people with the skills to succeed as technology evolves, as the consumer evolves? We're now facing a new growth of artificial intelligence. All of those trends put real stress on talent. And we also are in a world where the population isn't growing. And so the ability to get new talent is even more scarce. And so those who are really focusing on skills and organizational structure and development, particularly in a hybrid world, I think are those who are preparing for the future best.
Hey, David, can we talk about talent a second before we flip this over to marketing? Because the other thing I will say, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, is a lot of the talent is not being trained like it used to be trained because there isn't the money or the time to train the talent. Is that a fair comment or not?
I think I hope that's not true at Nielsen. It's an investment I protect. I think that is generally true. When I look at the clients I work with today, I do find that people are not being developed as they used to be, when the need for development is actually orders of magnitude more than it was a decade ago because of all the trends I described before. So I do think there is a divergence between development, training, mentoring, and the skills required. And I think we all learn to use technology to work remotely part of the time. Most businesses are hybrid now. And that's actually, there's a lot of good in that, but that's creating a real burden because people don't know how to develop in a hybrid format the way they need to.
Yeah, so we'll move on, but I agree. I also think not being in the office at least some of the time deprives you of tons of training through serendipity and just casual, connections to other functions.
Absolutely.
So let's write the marketer into that story, since many of our listeners are marketers or ad agencies. What should they be doing now to prepare for that kind of future, both in the marketing function, also as an agency?
Well, I always say, if you've got a problem on a plane, put your own oxygen mask on first before helping others. So I would say here it's really important that CMOs acknowledge what they don't know. I think making time to read, to learn, to network, to try new things, I think is really important because you're not going to be able to develop your team and your colleagues if you're not developing yourself. And I think the same with agencies. You've got to be curious and make sure you've got enough time to be looking at what's out there. So that's an obvious first step. in terms of what to learn, I do think, and as you know, I spent a lot of time in machine learning and AI.
Yeah.
I do think it is accelerating. It creates a lot of opportunity to be more effective. It creates risk as well. So understanding that is key. We have more data than we ever had about the consumer. She's sharing a lot more with us. Making sure you know how to use that data and not abuse it, I think, is key. And it's a team sport. So as you're a marketer, increasingly marketing, supply chain, sales, product development, finance, IT, these things all have to work together. So the more you're looking sideways at the rest of the functions you need to interact with, I think the better you're going to be, the more effective you're going to be, the more valuable you're going to be to your consumer or your customer, and also to your company.
So this goes back to our discussion about remote work actually may potentially slowing down some of that understanding of other functions. And I love the discussion about you need to learn and acknowledge the stuff you don't know. But in addition to listening to this show, what other recommendations, do you have any specific recommendations of how people should go learn this stuff? Because there's so many possibilities to learn.
So there's a number of good blogs out there from all the cloud companies, from Microsoft, from Amazon, from Google, around AI and what they're seeing. And I subscribe to all of them. And I think it's important to learn and understand what the applications are there. I also think it would be important to go to marketers like to go to Cannes, they like to go to CES, but I actually
I have never gone to Cannes, but I have gone to CES a lot. But yes.
Well, it's amazing how many people are going to fly to France in 2 weeks to meet with each other when they have offices up and down Madison Avenue. But I guess it's better with rosé. However, I would say it's valuable to spend more time on other topics. The more marketers that go to conferences around diversity, I think, really learn a lot about how to build a talent base. Those who go to conferences around data science, understand the basics, I think are just getting stronger. And so, again, it's not just reading, it's also pushing yourself into adjacent areas. And conferences are a great way to do that. They get you back together, they get you to see people. But sign up for things that are adjacent to your space as opposed to staying in your lane. And I think you become a more rounded and more effective CMO or agency leader.
I like that. Widening instead of deepening, I think, is how I've kind of looked at it. So here we are. It's Nielsen, so I have to talk about measurement. Let's talk about what's happening on the measurement front. We've seen measurement explode in the last couple of years. Tell us, top line, what should our listeners be thinking about measurement?
Well, and some things haven't changed at all. So, obviously what we measure is audience behavior, how they engage with media. The first, a lot of your listeners will know Nielsen ratings from the way they use them for buying ad space. But the first use of Nielsen is actually programming and deciding what to produce. And that's really changed. The media companies used to build an audience in a pretty straightforward way. They had 24 hours, you programmed about 18, and you had to figure out what show to put in every hour. And you would invest to fill the 9 o'clock hour, the 10 o'clock hour, that'd be your primetime slate. You'd buy sports rights, you'd invest in some news coverage, and everything worked on a schedule. Now, where the majority of American households don't have pay TV, and pay TV continues to get canceled in favor of streaming apps, that takes the whole notion of time-based media and moves it away. And I think that's especially true in entertainment. And so now you actually need to look at all 24 hours. You need to be much more comfortable with randomness and figure out what to produce to get people to choose you on demand. That's a much higher burden for media companies. They have to become marketers in ways they never were before. And the measurement had to change because we had to move away from giving people, primetime ratings, 11 p.m. ratings, morning ratings, daytime ratings. We just had to give them 24 hours a day. And that also means that video covers streaming apps like Netflix and Amazon Prime and YouTube, as well as networks. So that's a massive change in the way media actually produces its product. The second part of that is, of course, that completely changes the way you buy advertising as well, because you're trying to fit into that, into that flow. The ad loads are coming down. Consumers have a limit to how much they're going to watch. That means the value is going up because you've got less chance to reach the consumer. You've got to be really right about it. And you've got to define the audience much more than just the time slot. So that, the change in measurement is just reflecting the fundamental change in behavior. The other thing I think that says for marketers, because brand scale always matters, and being able to reach the maximum number of people is important for a large scale brand. That's harder to do when they're not watching the same things at the same time. So that the one thing people are still watching in large numbers at the same time is sports.
Right.
And so I think this also just increases the value of sports. No matter how much you're spending on sports, you really have to understand them because they set the price for everything else.
They do.
All of media live, and we see that umbrella getting bigger and taller and wider. Some brands did not believe they were sports brands, and they may not be, but that doesn't mean they don't need to understand them, because sports is actually, in this new world, the content that is setting the stage for everything else.
And it's an audience building block, whether you like it or not. I mean, it's because it's the only remaining really big building block on a massive data set. Is that fair to say?
I do think that's true, right? There's a few live award shows and breaking news draws people together, but it's not always the best environment. So yeah, I think sports is the only thing you can count on as a foundation for any brand of scale.
All right, very good. So I think you've already kind of talked about what's next here. Is this is just going to get more and more complicated. The data stack is going to get bigger and bigger. We've had a bunch of people on the show talk about that measurement is a great thing and it's wonderful, but that the focus on measurement is actually crowding out creativity, brand building, and a lot of times innovation, because everyone's moving to short-term stuff. Tell us about that. Then write in the story about like how should people be thinking about commercials going forward? Like, you got this measurement, you got all this stuff. Tell us what we should be thinking about.
Yeah. So first of all, I disagree with the premise that it's crowding out creativity. I think what's important is that you measure the right thing. I think that the challenge is too many people are wanting to measure the quarterly income statement, and they're not measuring the multi-year balance sheet. Great brands with customer loyalty and great customer bases are assets. And we don't know how to put those on the financial statement the way we should. But a smart marketer, a smart CEO, a smart board of directors really focuses on the asset. So if you start with, I'm building an asset, then you've got to have a set of measurement, which is, am I getting enough scale in that asset? Am I nurturing enough to build it over time? Am I seeing the behavior? When I'm doing promotional things, are they building back the brand asset? So I totally believe the right measurement can lead to great work. So it's not that measurement crowds out creativity. In fact, I think it's hard to justify the investment without measuring. But I think you've got to get to the point you can measure asset building and not just quarterly income statements.
So David, since the dawn of the Pleistocene era, and surely since I started at Procter, everyone's been trying to measure the value of brands. No one's actually succeeded in that. Maybe the consumer goods companies have some kind of good measure for it, but everyone's been trying for years and years and years. How come there's not more progress on this?
Because they don't get credit for it in the financial markets.
Yeah.
Unless they work hard on it. But I'm more optimistic that, listen, it is always an estimate or a predictive estimate of what's going to happen in the future. But there's a lot of services businesses that have gotten much smarter at net present value, lifetime value of a customer,
Right.
beginning to look at that and the role of brand in that. I think some of the car companies have gotten really smart on it. So I've seen more focus on brand and brand loyalty. And as they've culled the number of brands they're supporting, they've gotten better about building the brands they have. So that's making a difference. And, I talked about media, which is just learning how to market, ironically, because they used to just program to these cable schedules,
Right.
but now they actually have to compete every minute of every day. And they're getting much smarter about how their platforms work, use cases, discovery, all the things that add value to a consumer in the product that actually make it more loyal. So I do think people are getting better at measuring brand value in terms of customer loyalty, customer scale, and being able to count on those relationships as long as you keep nurturing them for years and decades to come.
And I know there is a move towards NPS and retention becoming part of a lot of this. Any examples you want to give so our listeners can understand when you talk about the media companies rethinking how they do it? Anything you want to share? A good example?
Yeah. Well, I would say, Netflix started on streaming first, and those companies should speak for themselves. But I think what they've said publicly and what I've seen up close is they really use data to make sure they're the first streaming app, that they're positioned so people go there first, and that they're, constantly tweaking the way they present their content on a very individualized basis so that people get suggestions of what to watch next. And I see that working really well. YouTube does it in a different way, but I think the way they've really focused on their algorithms and autoplay to, keep teeing up the next video that people will find engaging, has people watching an enormous amount of content. Most people are surprised that over half of all YouTube content is actually viewed on a television screen.
Yeah.
So it's really become television to so many people, and that started with a very different, highly personalized approach, using data, using AI to sort of tee it up. And I think they also use that to make big decisions. They spend tens of billions of dollars with content creators, and you've got to pick which ones are going to work and not work. And providing the data to make those decisions has helped those content creators and helped YouTube. Those same things are now coming back to sort of the new platforms out of Paramount Plus or Max from Warner Discovery or Peacock out of NBC. All of those, and of course Hulu, right? All of those streaming apps are building these new skills, following those who kind of went first. And so it's just interesting to see how rapidly media marketing is evolving and how quickly they're changing their tools. Because they used to be building image using promotional spots on the linear television schedule, and now it's really changed in just a matter of a few years.
This is super interesting. Why we're on it, let's talk about the standard commercial that was in place years and years ago. I think started by Procter on the daytime soaps. Is that and we just talked about everybody go to con. Is the commercial headed for extinction? And you look at the Super Bowl where people are still pouring money into the Super Bowl ads, but then you see the decline of, in general, the regular commercial. Tell us what's going on there and what you think is going to happen.
Well, I think you've just got more choices and more formats. Back to customer behavior, folks who are watching live events, those can be programmed to create natural breaks, whether it be the Super Bowl or the Olympics or the World Series or what we're doing right now in the NBA finals. You can create natural breaks. You can have a reasonable unit. They kind of all have to be the same length, 15, 30, or 60 seconds, because you've got to fit in the break. It's got to work. So, that works for live events. In the entertainment part of media, which is, a much bigger percentage of the time, when you're watching on demand, you've got more choices. You can have any length, right? You can have 12 seconds, 18 seconds. So you can find different ways to tell the story. You can have interstitials. You can have things around the screen. So there's so much more opportunity to deliver a message in a natural way when it's streamed on demand, because you don't have to fit a standard, because everybody else is watching it on a different schedule in a different place. So we've seen this for years in the digital space, in the display world, but it's coming to video as well. I think back to creativity, it increases the need to have truly, great creative and great storytelling that the consumer loves, because otherwise they can tune it out, they can move on. They've got lots of ways to avoid the ads as well, if you're not really adding value by, telling them a great story in a great format that appeals to them.
I agree with this. Like when we were at Farmers, or when I was at Farmers, we had that jingle, and we could get power out of that jingle in 6 seconds.
Because you built an asset.
Yes, that was a super asset, impossible to measure on the balance sheet, but tremendously worth a lot of money. And I'm hopeful that a lot of our listeners are humming the jingle right now. Hey, so you've interfaced with CMOs forever, your whole career. Tell us about the job and how CMOs should be thinking about. And how boards should be thinking about getting the most out of their CMO, like CEOs and others, because it is still the fastest turning job in the C-suite. And I can't believe that's good for CMOs or companies.
No, and I think the challenge is, and I see this in a lot of companies, it's viewed as the glue to cover a lot of other issues, right? Great CMOs tend to live alongside great products and great services, and they tend to live in strong financial companies that have balance sheets that can make multi-year investments, and they tend to work well with their tech partners on how to use data in a different way. So the environment of the CMO is key, and too many CMOs, are just charged with all that's working well, leave it alone, just go make sure you generate more leads, you generate more opportunities, you generate more ways for us to sell, as opposed to CMOs who are really the voice of the customer, who deeply engage in, is the product right? Is the data that we have about the customer actually reflect what they're doing? Are we doing things in a way that they trust and respect? Is it the right price? And how does supply chain work in order to deliver that product in the right place at the right time? When CMOs are engaged alongside the CEO on how it all works, they're very successful. But to think that you can live in the marketing silo in 2023 and get anything done, I think is naive. And that's why it's easy to change them, because they're not connected.
I agree with this. I think what you just said is going to be music to most CMOs' ears. And I think part of this is how CMOs have to spec out the job. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Keep going. I was just saying, but then those CMOs have to speak up. They have to be aggressive.
Well, and don't take the job if you don't have the seat. Because if you don't have the seat where you can actually bring the customer to the company and the other way, you're going to get held accountable for it anyways, but you're not going to have the authority to change it and a seat at the table. And the other thing is, I think some companies should also be looking at the job spec to say, is the authority to drive sales going with the responsibility, or are we just hoping that we're going to put a nice brand campaign out there and change all these problems? I think that's a really big deal. Well,
and I back to adjacent accountability. So Jamie Modowski is the CMO at Nielsen. She, was very successful before that at Amex, Schwab, and Wells Fargo. But now she also has HR,
Right.
because so much of our brand is delivered through our people, and also back to the talent issue, was our number one issue. We needed to make sure that our story worked internally and externally. And she also has customer success and is kind of the chief advocate for the customer by having the most frontline data on how products are used. And I think that, that's because she's a CMO who's also been a CEO. She ran KitchenAid for a while. And
Yeah.
I look for CMOs who want to flex their general management skills, because I think that's really what you need. I think the classic, CMO producing great commercials and building the brand by putting them in a good media plan, like I think those days are done.
I agree with you.
And so the CMOs also have to have a seat which is firmly at the center of the table for a marketing-led company.
So, any advice you have for CMOs when they get in front of a board? Because you've been on many boards. Like, give our folks out there some tips.
I think what's important is that the CMO make the business case. I mean, boards are accountable for increasing the value of the company. And I think most boards actually understand that that's the balance sheet, not just the income statement. And
right.
they want to understand what the asset is. But you've got to be able to tell that story, and you got to tell that story with numbers, not just words, so that a board can get, and it can be, rough estimates, but if a CMO works well with the CFO before they get into the room and can tell the story in a way that the boards can understand it and relate it to other investments that the company may be making and relate it to their mission of shareholder value, it tends to resonate and they tend to see the strategic value. I think the other thing that I have found really effective in some CMO presentations is they make sure to call on their colleagues during the discussion. So they connect it to supply chain, they connect it to sales, they connect it to IT, they connect it to finance. And the more a board sees that marketing is relied on and understood by the colleagues and peers of the CMO, the more you feel like it's central to the company as opposed to, a cherry on top.
Yeah, so I hear you saying, make sure as a CMO you're driving the business and the marketplace, not the marketing department, and bringing everybody into that is a really good way to do it.
So, yeah, and you've got to do that, day to day, but specifically when you're in the boardroom, don't change that. Where I've seen it go wrong is when CMOs think, okay, the board wants to see, the latest campaign.
No.
And even if that's what they asked for, I think the more they understand, how this is central to the way the company operates, the better.
I agree with this. Thank you. Hey, so we're almost at time, so I'll give you a two-part question. You could take one or both parts, but you have to take one.
Okay.
Funniest marketing story you could share on the air, and or practical advice you would give our listeners that we haven't discussed yet.
Well, the funny marketing stories, the challenge is the marketers won't want me to share those on air. I would say
that shouldn't stop you, in my opinion, but okay.
I hear you, but you were a client once and you wouldn't want me to tell your stories, Mike.
Oh, you could if it was really funny, but I get it. Yeah.
But I do think on practical advice, I go back to where I started, which is around the talent. The only way you're going to be a great CMO in 24 and 25 and 26 is that you have recruited, developed, promoted a great team. And the more your team is taking things off your plate, the more your team is building the skills you need, the better. And that team can be people who are directly reporting to you, and they can also be kind of an expanded team of folks who are helping you from other functions. But it's all about the people. And I think more and more every year, the more you understand marketing is a team sport and you're building that team, the more successful you're going to be. There's no other way to do it.
Well, I think that is a great way to end the show. A piece of wise advice from a person that's been there, done that multiple times. So thank you, David. And thanks to everyone for listening to CMO Confidential. Look for more of our shows on Evergreen, Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, which include What Venture Capital Really Thinks About Marketing. Is the CMO position headed for extinction? What I learned as New York City's first ever CMO under Michael Bloomberg, and a CMO turned B School professor offers her thoughts on how to fix the CMO position. Hey, all you marketers, be safe out there. This is Mike Linton signing off for CMO Confidential.
Today's episode of CMO Confidential is brought to you by CMOcoaches.com. Are you a current or aspiring chief marketing officer looking to take your career to the next level? You should work with a CMO coach. CMO coaches are former CMOs who are nationally certified coaches. So whether you want to improve your leadership skills, develop your team, or drive better business results, we have the experience and expertise to help you succeed. To learn more, visit us at CMOcoaches.com.
Hi, my name is Sarah, and I want to tell you about my podcast called Can I Offer You Some Feedback? I'm a business consultant and executive coach with over 20 years experience in change management, leadership development, and naturally providing feedback to high performers. My podcast is for those of you who have a complicated relationship with feedback, whether giving, receiving, avoiding, or seeking. Feedback is essential for our development. In each episode, you'll hear from real people across industries with their ideas, perspectives, and best practices on feedback. I'll also be sharing business bites with you, simple explanations of organizational tools, management techniques, and leadership philosophies that will help you and your businesses thrive. You can listen to Can I Offer You Some Feedback on your favorite podcast app or learn more at evergreenpodcasts.com.
Are you tired of the same old productivity hacks? Have you read the top 20 books on effectiveness, and yet your workdays and email inbox still causing anxiety, burnout, and even depression? Ready to learn the latest in brain-based modalities, techniques, and technologies to optimize your success and well-being? Welcome to the Focus to Evolve podcast, where we'll illuminate your path to spacious productivity and balanced thriving. Each week, we dive into deeply insightful and immediately impactful methods to help you become highly effective while promoting health, profitability, and well-being. Say goodbye to the trance of busyness and hello to your highest potential. It's time to discover a new way of accelerating your mission, growth, and purpose. Join us on the Focus to Evolve podcast and get ready to live your most joyful, productive, and fulfilling life.